strays, stop following me around.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. This season, perhaps you know, is G versus Wing, and that means my host is the wispy...
Scary.
All right, hey, we're going to talk about episode 18 of both G Gundam and Gundam Wing this week, but before we do that, Bob, how's your week been going?
My week has been... Well, I've been running behind on some stuff, but I've gotten some great inspiration from going to a webinar on some voice acting stuff, so much so that I'm going to be taking a number of courses with the people of this webinar as soon as I get my finances in order. I also just finished working on some game development stuff with a friend on a way to effectively play a Dread style RPG using only playing cards, and we're looking forward to drafting up the rules for that next week. But also next week, that'll be the 2nd of November, if not the 1st, the SRD, the standard rules document for an RPG I've been working on for several months now, will be dropping on the various websites.
On the various websites, that sounds pretty good. Over here, nothing too exciting. A car accident has just taken place outside of my home not 10 minutes ago. It's
Oh, wow.
a bit messy, but all the people seem okay. The cars have had a worse go of it. So traffic's kind of backing up there. On a more professional level, just very busy. Bob, a lot of meetings throughout the week on various projects, not just only my animation project, but... I'm also taking jobs on other people's projects. I'm helping somebody out as a line producer, doing what I can to help them with that. I'm doing VFX consulting for somebody. I'm going to be acting as a first AD for a couple of peers of mine, and I'm also doing a bunch of location scouts and hiring meetings for this pilot I'm about to direct in the winter as well. So staying very busy here today, no different before and after your recording, is pretty much nonstop meetings all day. So that's what's happening here. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, queries for either Bob or myself as you listen to our podcast, don't hesitate to email zakutalkcast@gmail.com, thankfully set up by Lev a few weeks ago. So Bob, tell us what's going on in episode 18 of G Gundam.
Episode 18, Steal the Secret, Scheme of the Beautiful Warriors, or in Japanese, Hisatsuwasa o Nusume, Bijou Gundam no Daisakusen, which to directly translate is actually Steal Special Moves, Great Operation of the Beauty Corps. Chibity's pit crew notice how strange Chibity has been acting lately, so they run off to the Guiana Highlands. Chibity chases them, and in the process he finds Domon and begins to train with him. Together, they sharpen their skills and get more out of their training. Meanwhile, Chibity's crew have stolen the combat data on the Shining Gundam. Rain catches them, and they run away with Rain chasing after them. During this, they are trapped in the middle of an overflowing river and have to call for Chibity and Domon for help. Chibity and Domon try their best, but nothing works. A sudden gush of water threatens the girls, and Domon activates his super mode, stopping it. The girls are then rescued by Schwartz, who challenges Domon to master his super mode.
All right, very well put there. And over here in Gundam Wing, we have a very exciting episode 18, Tall Geese Destroyed, or in the Japanese, Tarugisu Hakai, which I imagine Hakai is destroyed in some fashion.
Hakai is literally destroy. It is so much of a one-to-one that there was a sequel series to Keykider, a very well-known animation and eventual live action done by my personal major creator, Shotaro Ishinomori. The sequel series was called Huckhider, literally destroyer.
All right, so here in Tall Geese Destroyed, Zex fights a heavy battle with the Tall Geese against Alliance mobile suits, while Lady Un forces the Gundam engineers to design and build mobile suits superior to the Gundams, under threat of destroying a shuttle that houses Catra inside. Meanwhile, Treize stands up to the Romefeller Foundation. All right, so that's what we have going on here. So, episode 18 for you, Bob. Is this right? I imagine, do most of these kinds of shows have these like training arcs and everybody sort of fighting to get better?
Yes. Well, so looking from a general just shonen style series, and for those who are looking for words, shonen literally just translates to boy. So this boys series, I wish I had more to say on that, but it's literally just shonen means boy, and shoujo is girls anime is what you would hear for shoujo
say
anime.
Shoujo? Okay, so that's like,
Yeah,
that would be
shoujo.
like Sailor Moon would be a shoujo, or Card Captors.
Yeah, that would be a shoujo series. In fact, B-shoujo or B-shonen, that prefix B, is supposed to represent beautiful. So beautiful or pretty girl or boy. If you do B-shoujo, it's pretty girl. B-shonen, pretty boy.
Aren't they always pretty? Is that when are they not?
Okay, for those who have seen shows like Revolutionary Girl Utena, you would know that there are plenty of B-shonen as well as B-shoujo, often shown as like having the long hair and the regal nature, very soft features. You could also say that Zex Marquise, underneath his mask, when he is in fact a Peacecraft, his Peacecraft self is a B-shonen.
Oh, Gundam Wing loves its B-shonen. It became famous because of it, quite frankly.
Yes, correct. It without doubt.
Okay, it just feels like one where the character's ugly. One of the protagonists in a show ever ugly, though. Not that I could tell because it's cartoons, but they always feel like they look the same.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in G Gundam, just as an example, you could say that George Descend is a B-shonen, but you wouldn't necessarily say that of everyone. I mean, compare him to Argo Gulski.
Okay, I think so. It's not a show type. Like there aren't B-shonens versus shonens. Like there are just characters that are B-shonens within a shonen.
That is true. That would be more accurate to say. Kurama is a B-shonen in a shonen anime compared to
Kuwabara.
Kuwabara, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha.
But to get off of our words for the day, yeah. So in any martial arts series, whether it's anime or otherwise, training sequences are important because it shows the effort that one goes through to develop into the capable fighter that we are rooting for. This is also our opportunity to see this team that was supposed to be together from the get-go, that separated after their crisis, start to come together, starting to realize what benefit they have by working together and to help bolster each other up. We get that first with Chibity, and as we'll see next week, we'll also get that with Argo and Saisaishi. George will be the last to come to the fray. But we are learning about everybody's weaknesses and how they can help to amplify the strengths of others with their own, or to compensate for. This is a way to get the group style of training done, compared to just if we were to focus on a single martial artist, a single warrior of some kind, we would be focusing on them doing in Kill Bill Volume 2. Yeah, we watch as the bride is practicing her 1-inch punch, where she has to put her fingers against wood and then just instantly go into a punch, forcing enough of her energy from a standstill in order to actually break wood. That is a training sequence, part of the entire training montage that lasts 2 or 3 scenes at least. To watch her develop from being someone who could just hit hard and swing a sword around to someone who could develop their body into a weapon when they are left weaponless.
Okay. By that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Does that even answer your question? I feel like I might have gotten away from it.
No, I mean, it sort of does. Like, as you were sort of bringing up other shonen, I was thinking of them too, and I go like, yeah, you got here. But even just sort of on a generic level of what you want to do at the beginnings of your Act 2 in the early stages, you know, this Gehenna area just feels like you're a traditional kind of watering hole area where after the big ordeal that gets you out of the first act, you then kind of, you know, Luke Skywalker goes to the cantina, a cowboy goes to a saloon, and like there's a moment for things to kind of calm down, to figure out kind of what their next moves are and how to go ahead. And then they kind of meet some allies. So like Simba meets Nathan Lane and the Warthog guy.
Yeah.
So you get stuff like that. So it makes sense now. Now, it might seem odd because he's already met these 4 other pilots, but if they're going to come back one by one and now kind of take on the mantle of these shuffle people that was given to them, now they sort of are more directly allies, when before they were sort of one-offs and then they were antagonists, and now they get to sort of join as a team here throughout whatever this training will ensue.
Yes. And I mean, just as another example, not having to require martial arts, think of 80s films. I'm going to let that hang for a second. Mm-hmm. American 80s cinema had a love affair with the musical montage. It gave us an opportunity to see things that were not necessarily important to the overall story, but showed us the development of people's efforts, whether that's just as a group bonding exercise, cleaning up a dingy old house into something that they would call home, what have you. It gives you a peek into who these people are outside of action, adventure, excitement. We get to see that, oh, hey, these people are putting themselves through whatever their ordeal is in quick succession, so we don't have to wait 80 episodes of filler.
Yeah, you know, the 80s, it's sort of that montage flavor sort of peaked with, I think, like Rocky IV, where that movie might legitimately be 70% montage. Like, it's
really,
it's so ridiculous. Just all the things that didn't need montages just got montaged in there because they're like, oh, people are liking this part of the movie. Let's just do this all the time.
I'm thinking of that episode of The Simpsons where Bart gets stuck in a room with Roman numerals and he has to try and remember it from the beginning. Rocky 2 plus Rocky 5 equals Rocky 7, Adrian's Revenge. Yeah. And I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, that was pretty
Thank
good.
you so much.
There actually are now 7 Rocky movies out, but actually 8, I think, if you count the Creed movies.
Are you including the Creed films?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do. I think Creed 1, very good movie. A worthy successor to that franchise that went downhill immediately after the first movie.
Oh, well, such is current state of cinema.
Yes.
But coming back to it, do you have any direct questions before I go
really.
off?
I don't know. Like he's sad that he can't cut the tree with his samurai sword, as most anime characters can. He hasn't figured it out yet. But like that feels like it's setting up. Is like is he going to do that in like 4 episodes and cut it? He's going to be like, aha, my training is complete.
I wouldn't say necessarily 4 episodes, but it is going to be our benchmark.
Okay.
What we're seeing right now is Domon, who, for all intents and purposes, we've considered him this master martial artist for a number of episodes before we start seeing, no, just Master taught him well enough for him being 12 to 22.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He is not fully trained as an individual martial artist or to be able to lead. So the idea of using this sword, it has nothing to do with the sword and everything to do with his skill. When he develops enough skill, ability, as they'll say, he will be able to cut down trees. And it also doesn't help that he's trying to cut down what looks almost like a redwood's worth of thickness compared to what was a birch. Yeah,
he's just like, why don't I have anime powers yet? You know, it's amusing. And Rain thankfully says what me, the layman to the genre and martial arts in general, is thinking, why is
He's just
Domo,
jumping in the river?
Yeah, well, why is he jumping? How is this training? What is all this jumping doing? And I go like, okay, well, at least you're acknowledging it too that I'm confused as well. But but it tells me like Domon thinks it's training, so now I have like a place to start trying to understand what he's doing.
The physics is where that comes in. Jumping from that height down into a pool of water, not even considering that it's a running waterfall, a wide, raging waterfall, it's also going to, if he does not land correctly, hit like concrete on contact. So to be able to penetrate the surface alone already shows that he has some ability to have not hurt himself. But to add on top of that he needs to be able to fight the rushing water as it goes underneath the surface to be able to get out without drowning is part of the training. What we see by the end when he shows his fighting spirit, that burning thing that you saw versus Chibity, that's showing him being able to do things like when he's that ball and is able to rush all the water off his body. Anime as hell, but it's supposed to show that he is getting stronger and more agile because he's able to fight the current, pierce through the surface, and then be able to remove all that moisture that was on his body in a series of simple flourishes. We are seeing his development, and that show of training and skill is what inspires Chibity to stop being fearful of the devil cells that were taking him over in his mind.
Yes, I just appreciated having a nice little aside moment where one character in the anime says, how are these anime tropes going to help? I don't need them to address. Again, I don't need them to answer that. It's just a fun little joke for me. And then,
sure. But
then she gets distracted because Chibity's harem kind of comes on by to steal these data, having heard of Domon's vacation plans very quickly. And I like that in their flashback, they look like the criminal life they had before they met Chibity has them depicted as like 80s Madonna's music video background extras.
I mean, you're not wrong. My favorite of the four of them, Bunny, the brown-haired girl with the glasses.
Yeah.
She had probably my favorite piece of 80s teen girl dressing, which is the giant, overly floofy bow on her head.
One of them had like these big red goggles on. I was for it. I wish there was like a show about them. I would watch the prequel.
Oh, absolutely.
Ocean's
That's Vice Quits on another level.
Of that show. I would do that for like 13
They're just
episodes.
a bunch of delinquents.
Yeah.
And it's so good.
Yeah, it's they're the Jets, and they're trying to break into space and steal some stuff. I'd be for that. Yeah, they steal some data, but Chibity, after everything's over, is just like, no, and destroys the data in the most intensive way possible by punching it in the air. Pretty good. So German guy clearly has some machinations going on here. One, because he tells us a bit, but more importantly, he tells us in poetry. Is this a common thing in this type of genre? These people who talk in these overt metaphors?
So one thing that seems to happen enough, especially with ninja in stories, is that they are, how to put it? They are definitely people who depict their handle on things in subterfuge and double talk in order to make sure that if they want you to know something, you'll figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, you don't get to know. So to wax on with philosophy and poetry is a way for them to try and see if you can pick up the message. It's thieves can't if you're a D&D player.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So that's not uncommon. The fact that we saw him show himself off as this weird and semi-prophetic old man sitting by the Brooklyn Bridge and starting to lace the ideas into these girls' heads, that is a common trope with ninja-style stories. To be able to deftly create a disguise, be able to act as this person, give the advice that it's needed, or to try and sway the minds of people to act in the way that you wish them to, and then be able to just get out of Dodge before people can figure out if there's any kind of ruse to be had. So he's definitely fitting in with a lot of the tropes that you would see in ninja stories up to that point. This is well before your Naruto days.
Yeah, I don't know. That feels like a very, Twilight approach to ninjas. Not that I'm well versed in anime ninjas from before Naruto. But like, were there a lot of sort of ninja shows about ninjas specifically, or were they side characters in those? And this is, I don't know.
There were enough stories going on in the 80s and 90s, especially, that started to really show off ninja as they would be depicted in a lot of fiction, even well before we started having animation as an option. You would have things like, I think there was one called Ninja Warriors that used to run back in the 80s that had Sonny Chiba, a very well-known Japanese actor who, by the way, played Hattori Hanzo in the first Kill Bill. All right.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, very well-known. In fact, so well-known that he got to go onto a Japanese talk show with Keanu Reeves while he was doing promos for John Wick, and they both gushed about each other's acting. Because Keanu Reeves, coming from the West Coast, would already have been able to watch a lot of these Japanese shows by way of like Hawaiian and Californian TV stations, being able to get them with like either bad dubbing or subtitles, something that you don't see here on the East Coast.
Yeah.
But they would have these characters do these sorts of things where it's like, okay, we're going to find a way to do our transportation or have you think that the people that we are actually these logs that we put into place. And a lot of these things are no different to Japanese culture than what we do with when we make head nods to magicians with the hats and the canes and the capes and whatever, or to wizards or, what have you. Fill in your blank here with your Western A to B. Yeah. But the point is that we have a lot of shorthand that we take for granted because it's part of our society. It's part of our media culture. And it's the same thing for them. When you think of ninja out in Japan, you think of people doing mind magic, use poisons, have fishing line wire that's strong enough to cut you in half. All these different little things that are gimmies and you pick up instantly as being standard. So being able to rip off the entire costume to reveal that he's fully in his ninja garb underneath, not even a question.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no, to talk more on the girls, I appreciated getting some of the backstory on them because it's very easy to let people just be cardboard cutout fill-ins. And that's not to say that they're all filled out in this episode, but where the most that we've ever gotten from anybody was Bunny, to see something happen with the redhead whose name is escaping me right now.
Shirley. At least in English, it's Shirley.
Shirley, yeah. So redhead's Shirley. But to see that she not only appears to be the potential lead of these four girls, but that she is the most hell-bent on being great enough to meet Shibidi's gaze, because without him, they would never have been able to stay up in Neo America. They would have been transported back down and probably imprisoned. So without him, they would have nothing. And so they want to give him their everything.
Yeah, it was surprised. I guess it wasn't. Yeah, I guess I was a little surprised that we got backstory on these characters. The show could have easily not done it and would have felt fine. I like that they did it.
Yes.
But that is also to help now that we want to like Chibity more because the show wants him to be sort of part of this team with Domo. We have to have more reasons to like him. And so that backstory serves as an easy way to do that as well.
Yeah, well, for him to also care enough about these individuals and not be like, hey, can you send me like 1 to 4 other people? Thanks.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
He doesn't have to. He has built that bond with these women. And whether or not there's any romantic relation doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The fact that he trusts in them well enough and that they have become this bonded unit is something to admire in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's great. But nothing too surprising this episode for me. Exactly what you would want in a moment like this, in a show like this. So no other thoughts or complaints from me.
Wow, I'm surprised. I genuinely thought you were going to have more to say about some of the stuff that Domon was doing, or some of the far-fetched things that were happening with the running, the broken ankle, so on and so forth. But
yeah, I don't know. It's
glad that you accept it now.
Yeah, one hand, I've gotten a firmer hold on the language, we'll call it, of this show, and
Sure.
two, it felt like a little bit of a sillier episode anyway, which is also kind of what these watering hole scenes can do. They're a good time to throw in some levity. You've just kind of you've just usually come from a big, big decision moment, a very pivotal plot point. So usually we need to come down a little bit here. So it's like these girls have kind of a wacky plan to help their guy get his groove back. And so there's like a little bit of a caper as they're just running through the trees. The snake that likes to show up in a lot of these Gundam shows pops in for 5 seconds just to spook her and then like leaves when he's had his fun. Like, whatever, it's fine.
So with all that, I will also note that my hope, if I am correct here, is that Chibity's episode being on the lighter side is going to allow us to have something a little more serious with the Argo versus Sai episode that is coming up in the next episode 19.
Well, they share an episode?
They do.
Oh.
Yeah, they're trying to tighten up some of the timeline.
Yeah, I guess a lot's coming down soon, I imagine.
I have one last thing to talk about on G Gundam before we move over to Gundam Wing.
Sounds good.
I want to note that we have, now that we've gotten to the Guiana Highlands, already had our first acknowledgement of how clean, pristine, and admirable this area is. It was a sort of throwaway line by Rain right after that line that you liked was, where she complains about anime.
Yeah, she talks about the air being clean, breathable.
And that's what helps her to easily rest, because it's not filled with pollution. It's not a terrifying place that's filled with destroyed buildings or debris and old cars. It's just a very nice, likely cool to warm pool of water coming down from a waterfall. And it's just, compared to cold space or destroyed cities, it is in itself a paradise and a connection to the earth.
Yeah, speaking of which, the Gundam that Chibity fights as he destroys what looks like the Brooklyn Bridge.
That's the Scud Gundam.
Okay.
That's the one that I referenced to you a few episodes back. That is the Neo-Iraq Gundam.
Okay. Gotcha.
And this is probably in order to acknowledge the Operation Desert Storm that was occurring at the time.
Okay. Very fine there. All right, yeah, that's it. Those are all my notes.
All right, cool. But I will use that last note I made as a transition over to Gundam Wing, because we also have this moment, and I'm kind of skipping towards the end of the episode to come back to the beginning.
Sure.
Where Duo Maxwell in the class on the colony starts talking about how humans are these devastating animals.
Not really Duo Maxwell.
Not really Duo Maxwell?
No, not really Duo Maxwell. Did you watch the
episode?
episode?
I'm sorry, not Duo Maxwell. I'm sorry. I meant to... I just put that two together.
Holy
Yui shit.
Under the name Duo Maxwell. Mm-hmm.
What the hell?
Yeah.
My brain didn't even register that until this moment. Damn it. Hiro Yui, posing as Duo Maxwell, is talking about in his coming to class speech that, humans are these animals that think they get to control everything, and really they only live for a blip in the eyes of the earth, but by going to space they think they get to live eternally and do all these other things. I thought was a phenomenal way to acknowledge why technology went apeshit up in space and turned into just war stuff. This episode had some of the best imagery for why war should be acknowledged and to a degree respected because of the loss of life. I was instantly frustrated when that engineer had been talking about trying to just wipe away human interaction in these things, because it is the bloodshed of these people that make you think of why you shouldn't want war, as opposed to making a game of it.
Yes. So, yeah, that's Chief Engineer Tubarov, higher up in the Romefeller Foundation, directly under Duke Dermail, the head of the entire Rockefeller Foundation. You know, on the surface, it's something that would be very easy to push out to our modern world. Hey, we want to not risk lives as much as possible, so we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And it sounds noble on the surface, but as Treize, challenges them, and as Hiro sort of summarizes Treize's argument at the end of the episode over this great kind of montage that sets up our Gundam pilots for what's to come in the space section, and the engineers sort of complain about it too. It is interesting, what the atomic age has brought to our warfare, and sort of our view of pushing buttons makes it easier to make that decision to go to war. And and even now, in the 2010s, when drone strikes are irregular, there is something dangerous to turning it into an inhuman conflict, because resources have to be depleted to do it. And usually that resource is human life. And if they're not fighting on the battlefield, well, now you're just farming civilians. And that can be a dangerous way to go.
And I like that we also acknowledged how awful having these doll units are with the space combat that was used to utterly annihilate 20 people trying to save Catra. And my favorite moment is a lot to do with that individual who I don't even know that we got a proper name more than one time for the mustachioed man who led the other 19 men from the Alliance to try to save Catra. Most of them died, and then he sacrificed himself on Catra's shuttle to put him into the top half of his unit to drift into space, hopefully to be found.
Correct. A really fun, slow reveal where the shuttle shoots the damaged Leo suit away, and Lady Un shoots down that shuttle, assuming Catra's still on it. And then, 5 minutes later, when Hiro gives his speech, that's when we realize that Catra was in fact in there the whole time. Sadly, a moment that is left out of the manga as it tries to rush through the show pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So unfortunate there. It is interesting to see this kind of shaming speech that Treize gives to the Rockefeller Foundation, the mad scientists give to Lady Un, not a few minutes later, even though she's meant to be like Treize's number one pupil. So she still has quite a lot of work to kind of get to where Treize wants her to, if she can ever manage to get there.
Well, so my wife, when we were watching that episode, actually brought up a good point that perhaps Treize is keeping Un around to do the dirty work that he needs to be done in order for whatever his final goal is to be made clear, and is effectively using her as a patsy.
And to talk about more interesting Treize things before we move on to Zek's things, because he's also doing interesting things.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So you've seen these mobile dolls tear through Alliance soldiers. You're going to see them give the Gundam pilots quite a run for their money, and they're going to barely be able to hold on, and some of them aren't going to be successful against them. But Treize in a Leo is just like, fuck you guys, you don't get this, and just sort of blows up some shit, has his guys sort of hold the chief engineer hostage to a degree to kind of prove this value. What does he say? He says, you must learn to place more value on human life and come to love them. And then sort of hopes that, well, actually, before I say other quote that's of interest to me, let's talk about sort of what's going on with Zex here.
Sure.
Yes.
Did you want to start that?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess, just for our audience, if they didn't watch, you should, but if they didn't, Zex, having survived that assault from the Oct unit at the Antarctic base, has now been captured and is held by Oz. But the thought is that, they're going to court-martial him, and if he can't fight the Gundams anymore, then he'll probably get executed after that because of what he did in Antarctica. But it looks like Treize has sort of navigated a way for him to kind of escape by leaking information to the Alliance to find the carrier. And initially, maybe Treize was thinking, Zex, if you die here, it'll help Oz fight this civil strife that's happening now within the Rockefeller Foundation better. But Zex seems like he's able to escape, and Treize at the end of his little section kind of begs for Zex to come back to help prevent these worthless actions by worthless people, as he names them. So how did you take away everything going on with Zex, and sort of how did it color your opinion of him?
Well, as you've mentioned to me before, I do think that it's less about the idea that Zex is amazing for having escaped, and it's very clear to me, based on tropes and genre, that Treize intended for Zex Marquise to die. He knew that it would be that Peacecraft would find his way out of the situation just fine, but the moniker, the identity of Zex Marquise was going to die in that fight. And whether or not the character that Zex plays knew what was actually being said in that moment or not, we as the audience at that time probably weren't supposed to get it right away. But now in this day and age where we see that trope happen as often as we do, it seemed more clear to me that was the intent. And I feel like the way that they phrased it when Zex was being attacked and his mask helmet was being broken, I feel like it was worded in a way that was less satisfactory to me, saying that if this mask breaks, we will no longer be friends. The day this mask breaks will be the last of our friendship. He says something to that effect one or two times as his mask is already on the way to cracking on the way out. And that is eventually found within less than a minute after that to fully crack and break. And he declares his friendship with Treize to be done. So my curiosity, I guess, is why wouldn't they have milked that a bit and have a few different battles and have him just maintain the cracked helmet until?
Yep, I agree. It felt, especially, I remember way back to the first time I watched it, assuming that was setting something up for what was going to happen later on. Like it would start to crack now, and over time it would get more cracks in there. But yeah, they get to it very quickly. I don't know why. It would have been nice to have it set up maybe in that Antarctic battle, but I don't
have
know.
Like one or two episodes where it stays like that until it breaks around now.
Yeah, it happened really quickly. It's unfortunate, but it is just what happened.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that my read on that situation is fine, right?
Yeah. I like your read on that situation. I think it's a very good read for a first time through. I like it. It makes sense to me. And I just, want to point out that this thing that he says as he's talking about whether their friendship can last and Treize stop following me around and stuff is no matter what I do, I'm not able to escape from what he's planned for me. And there's something sort of hauntingly true about it, despite the fact that, as you've sort of noted or guessed well, is that Zex is going to have to do some navigating for himself between identities to survive the political turmoil that's about to come from all of the rapidly changing power structures in the entire Earth sphere that includes the colonies.
Well, I mean, I kind of wish you'd worded it differently than guessed. I mean, to me, but I mean, admittedly, I am a person who devours cultural, pop culture and genre stories. It seems very clear to me that was the intent that they were setting up. But then again, I might be underestimating that people might not see that right away.
Well, then I could use the term educated guess, but essentially it gave you clues and you formed an opinion based on that. So like to a degree, there is guessing. And to me, having watched it so many times, it feels like that's what it's doing. But a lot of first-time viewers kind of come and they really like Zex by this point. They don't really like Treize, so they just make the assumption that Treize wants Zex to die for his own vainglory and to achieve his ends. And so when he survives, they think like Treize has won that. And they don't, it's not until later on when they see Zex and Treize interact again where they come to look back at that moment in a different context. So that's what's kind of going on there.
I can buy into that. So I will say that at one point I was curious about whether or not the pilot in the shuttle was supposed to be Ketra or if it was in fact Hiro, because even though the audio was very clearly Ketra, the way that the pilot in his astronaut suit appeared, the bangs read to me as Hiro Yui, and Dr. J had noted that Catra was talking on Hiro's frequency. So I didn't know if that was supposed to be like a double bluff, and it was in fact supposed to be Hiro Yui mimicking the voice, because let's face it, Hiro has too many abilities to acknowledge as not being his.
Yeah,
he's able to jump off things and reset bones without crying and anything else. Of course, he could do mimicry, as far as I'm to believe as a viewer.
Yeah, it's the importance of hair in anime, hairstyle, hair color, because when he's in the suit and everything just looks blue, it can be hard to tell. But yeah, his voice is supposed to be the giveaway. He's on Hero's frequency because the other doctors are all using that too. They sort of all have a very similar strategy. They built the tall geese together with the help of one extra person, and they then use that to model their each individual Gundams.
I'll be very interested to find out who that extra person is, because that was never stated in the show yet. So now you've set me up for some expectation.
Now you got to watch around and see who that person could be.
But
a very important note on sort of Catra's function in the group, considering he's the weakest pilot, is Dr. J mentioning that he could be the one that could unite these 5 kind of disparate souls in this quest that's about to come to them. Yes, as much as I dislike episodes as titles, at least it wasn't really about the tall geese being destroyed, because it's not at the end of it. It's more of just like Zex's old identity kind of going away.
Yeah, which I kind of wish they would have just gone ahead and say Zex Marquise defeated or something to that effect.
No, I'm glad they didn't say that, because that's what I'm complaining about when they give these things away.
No, but it's a misnomer.
I take the misnomer, because then I'm expecting
but that's
it,
what
and
I'm
it doesn't
saying.
happen.
Is like, if we say that Zex Marquise is defeated or destroyed, that's technically true. It's not that Peacecraft, the human being, is defeated or destroyed. It is just that identity. And by saying defeated instead of destroyed, we're also acknowledging that there's the possibility.
Or you could
that
do
Zex Marquise, the identity comes back.
It could even be like the Lightning Count, Lightning Baron, something like that.
Yeah, I would prefer that over tall geese, because I do think that that's a misnomer, very much like the Trey's assassination. It's a misdirect as a title. It is the action that tries to happen, but it is not the follow through that occurs.
Yeah, I would take misdirection. I'm okay with those over blatant, like, hey, this person dies this episode. And you're like, oh, come on, what are we doing here? An interesting translation thing that I liked in the manga is when Zex is talking about his friendship with Trey's. He describes it as a friendship of kindred spirits. And I think that adds just a little bit of extra stuff to what is sort of going on between these two sort of warriors and how they view their fighting spirit and stuff like that.
And I think that they use something similar, at least in the Japanese read. I don't know if they acknowledge it in the American dub or not.
I mean, they say friendship, but this idea of kindred spirits, I think, is sort of an important note.
Well, I think they, correct me if I'm wrong, people in the comments or who want to contact us at
ZakuTalkCast@gmail.com. Yes.
Okay. But I believe in the Hulu subtitles, they use something to the effect of friendship of fate or something like that. It's something to that effect. So there is something to the same idea as kindred spirits, but maybe just slightly different wording.
Yeah, for me, fated, I guess, loses, I don't know, is a little less exciting and a little more like kind of mystical, like it's sort of predetermined kind of thing, where kindred spirits...
Is that really any different than kindred spirits?
Well, yeah, for me, kindred spirits is just like, I don't know, we're very different people, but at our core, there's a big similarity between us. There's something that's very common at our roots that has allowed us to kind of bypass all the stuff that shouldn't have us be friends.
I'm going to say two things to that.
Yes.
Firstly, does that mean that you think you and I are kindred spirits, Patrick Skeyhill?
No. Go on.
Yeah, fuck you too. The second thing is, this is where I always argue about connotation and denotation being so important.
Yes.
I think that your connotation of kindred spirits is what leads you to believe that it is less or more mystical than friendship by fate. To me, they're one and the same. But again, that's my connotation to this idea or ideal.
Yeah, because all kindred is just like a person who have similar interests or attitudes. So there isn't kind of a mysticism to it. I think sometimes people have taken it. So maybe I lean closer towards the literal side of it. Where Faded has this built-in kind of mysticism to it.
It was interesting to have the very quick vignettes of where each of the other pilots were with their suits and how they were handling the situation. Like seeing Duo Maxwell in the middle of what appeared to be some sort of a meteor belt.
Yep.
Inside his not even a full shuttlecraft, but like just a shuttle pod hiding among all of those. That was interesting to me. Or seeing the slightly damaged shuttle that Wu Fei was in.
Yeah, this show and Big O do very well these moments that I have stolen a lot in my own works. This sort of monologue, monologue over all these various vignettes to keep track of, the millions of characters that are built up in your world. I probably wouldn't do it a lot in movies, but I think it works really well with TV and sort of how it's structured and what you kind of your focus on many characters. So big fan of
the way you say that does make me have to ask the question. Mm-hmm. How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah. What about it?
Do you think that they execute that well when talking about that? That is a show rife with here's monologues over watching people do their various things, and trying to describe scenarios, all to build up this web of interconnectivity.
Well, for me, it's a cousin to it. I call it the Wonder Years effect. It's sort of somebody narrating, kind of giving a context to something, having the a priori knowledge from a future timeline. So, and you're only really keeping track of 5. And you're usually, it's not even that different from when Zach Braff does it at the end of the episode, though I think that the Scrubs version is closer to what this show's doing than the other version, though less sort of interesting. This is, those ones want to wrap up storylines, but here, this and Big O, they usually want to offer not exposition, but really just sort of like thematic meat for you to chew on based on its contraposition to the images that we're seeing. So
I'm trying to think of everything else. I thought it was funny. My wife picked on it more than even I did. When we see Lady Un show up initially in this episode, she comes in her feminine attire and her softer voice and everything. And it's not until the entire clothing sequence finishes with her donning her glasses that she turns into her militant self. Mm-hmm. And my wife was like, it's the glasses that make her a bitch, isn't it? Do you think that we're about wrapped on that part?
Yeah, I think we're fine there.
So do we want to go the way we go?
Yeah, for the way we go this week, I sort of had jokingly earlier mentioned Chibity having a harem, but a lot of this episode did give me flashbacks to Tenchi Muyo, which is a show.
Oh, I love Tenchi Muyo.
Yes, it was a show for a while. I thought like maybe I just nostalgically like it, but about 5 years ago, we went through pretty much all of it, because Shinji, longtime fan of the cast. Big fan of Tenchi, so we showed that to Micah, another friend of ours as well. And I'm just like, do I just like this show because he sounds like Ray Romano? But I don't know, there is something amusing about it. But it made me wonder, like, is this a show that's okay for sort of the current climate? Or is there a way to kind of do it and have it work with today's standards?
What, with the idea of having a harem?
Yeah, like, I don't know, is there...
Harem and reverse harem are totally things that continue to be regular.
Okay.
It just depends on how you go about it. There are some that are less savory than others.
And an
example is Sword Art Online. Yes, we're about to be hit by a bunch of people that get frustrated with us.
Wait, that's a harem show?
Some people have considered the possibility of it being a harem show, especially considering the wide array of women that seem to center themselves around the male presenting protagonist when they're in that world.
Oh.
That is my understanding, but I'm also ignorant because I haven't watched it because I've been told it's kind of ass unless I'm a teenager of its age.
I watched maybe 13 episodes of it or show. Like there's like
there's a bad thing that happens within that, I think, first 13 episodes.
Maybe, I don't know. They get out of the game, but like there's more show afterwards, but it was so flippin' boring, Bob, and I'm sick and tired of game shows where people are stuck in games. I'm done with it. I've moved on.
So isekai whether or not it has video games, just the idea of, oh, I've fallen into a different world. Isekai has such a stranglehold on the anime market right now. I complained about it with my wife.
Yeah.
I remember when Madoka had first dropped.
Yep.
And how, people were going nuts about it. Oh, it's a complete deconstruction and reiteration of how magical girls work. It's really not. But whether or not that's the case, it did not have nearly as much of a stranglehold on the way anime would be developed as isekai have. Because not only do you have video game ones, but you also have like just general, oh, hey, I fell into this place from a random world. How's that going? Technically, Digimon is an isekai.
Okay, this is a genre of people falling into worlds.
That's what I'm coming to understand is that this is just what people are calling a subgenre of anime. It's not just it's a fantasy isekai.
And you know what? I'm less annoyed by people falling into different worlds because there are many. I don't know. I guess just the fact that the world is always a video game is too narrow of an exploration for me.
I think that is probably the most accurate way to put it.
Yeah. Because I don't mind Inuyasha or Monster Rancher. Or was it a game? Did he fall into a game or was that just a world? I think that was just a world, even though like the summoning way was with discs. Yeah. So I have no fucking clue. Yeah.
But like Escaflowne.
And I could take maybe like two. You have Dot Hack and then maybe another one, fine. But it just feels like every year, like a new one comes out. And they're all Louis MMOs. And I'm like, done with them.
Every year a new one comes out. That's cute.
Yeah, was it more than that?
Yeah. In the past handful of years, I can guarantee that there have been more than just one a year. Because you have Sword Art Online, you have ReZero, you have Is It Okay to Pick Up a Girl in a Dungeon?
That sounds like an awful title.
That time I was reincarnated as a slime.
Also terrible.
You have, like, the list goes on.
All that sounds awful. I hate it. I hate it all.
Yeah, you can hate it as much as you want. It doesn't stop it from being popular.
Yeah, I hate most mainstream culture. But that's my lot in life.
Yeah. Was that just it that you were
so the point of my story,
harems work anymore?
Well, yes, that's the point of my story is no, because I didn't know Sword Art Online was a harem. That surprised me.
That's my interpretation. Don't quote me on that as being like defined by the culture.
I just don't remember that standing out, but that's fine. I just want to know. So you said there are savory and unsavory ways to do it. Is Tenchi Muyo done savory? And if not, is there a way to do? How would you do it savory?
I feel like for its time, it was okay. It's been years since I've seen it. And to be fair to the audience, I've only ever watched the original Tenchi Muyo. I didn't watch GXP. I didn't watch Tenchi Universe, Tenchi in Tokyo.
Tenchi Universe,
because I was so pissed at the end of the initial Tenchi Muyo that they reset the timeline and everything else. This is not what I signed up for. Give me a continuation. There's more story to be had here. So that was a frustration on my part.
Okay.
I think it really comes down to whether or not you want to apply the comedy of errors.
Yeah.
Which is a thing that frustrates me. But I know some people love comedy of errors situations. For those at home, a comedy of errors is when miscommunication arises and everybody misunderstands the intent behind one's wording or actions. So one of the most well-known, besides the obvious comedy of errors by Shakespeare, there's also The Importance of Being Earnest. That is another comedy of errors where people are claiming to be an individual that does not exist, and the comedy ensues. But I think besides that, it's a matter of whether or not you have people whether or not they are breaking their fidelity with their significant other during the course of a harem, swapping between individuals in more than just a flirty way. There's the question of whether or not it's consensual or just a fantasy situation. Do these women can these women pass a Bechdel test? If so, sure, we can make this happen. If they can't, then no. We should not make this happen, is how many people will rightfully acknowledge.
All right, well, that's...
You know what the Bechdel test is before I continue?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you can explain it for the audience.
Viewers, listeners at home, if you have two women on screen or on stage and they cannot spend a scene not talking about the male protagonist or a object of love interest, they cannot pass a Bechdel test.
Even more so than in Tenchi, the first Tenchi Muyo, Tenchi Universe, Tenchi Tokyo. It's sort of, I haven't seen many harems. I only hear people talk about them, but like
Love Hina. I think we watched like the Christmas special for that back in high school anime club.
If I sat in on that, I don't remember it, but
Sure.
you know, in sort of most Tenchi canon, only really 2 of the 6 women are into Tenchi, and the other ones are just kind of hanging around. And
That makes sense.
Tenchi has no interest in any of them. He wants just all these crazy space aliens out of his life, and he just wants to lead a normal high school life, and they're all just hanging around because like his grandmother was like a famous, or grandfather, his grandparents were like famous space warriors or something.
Yes.
And he just kind of keeps getting brawled into things. And Tenchi in Tokyo is really interesting because like he moves out to go to Tokyo to go to college and has a girlfriend. And like, you know, the 2 girls are mad about it, and the other ones are just like, leave him alone, it's fine. And the comedy really is about them, and then he's just sometimes in the middle, but sometimes into the side. In Tenchi Muyo, he's a lot more active, of kind of like a combatant against some of these space forces, but in the other ones, he's sort of just like a person that is just like the regular human being amongst all these supernatural beings. And so like he kind of has to rely on them to save the day and protect him in all of that.
Well, yeah, that's how a lot of harem stories actually end up having to play out, is that you have your very plain self-insert hole that you place your brain or self into the shoes of while everything else is occurring. That's kind of one of the staples of a harem anime. Oftentimes, it's more often than not a male, unless you're doing a quote-unquote reverse harem where it's a single girl with a bunch of guys around her. Or other love interests. People have gotten a wider spread of things as time has gone on, thankfully. But you have your plain character, and then you have a person, a love interest that fills a certain niche, so that no matter who's watching, they can pick their favorite, whether or not it's the one that they decide to make canonical or not. You have oftentimes some sort of mysticism behind it. It doesn't have to happen all the time, but at the very least, it should be absurd. If it's not something like Tenchi Muyo, where you have all these women are aliens and may or may not seem supernatural, you have things nowadays like Monster Musume. You know that one, right?
No, I do not.
Okay, Monster Musume is monster girls that are all interested in a guy who seems to be able to at least host one, if not several of them. Monster Musume actually came from a hentai doujin series called My Life With, where it was more sexual, but Monster Musume relies more on the sexual tension and has a person who's specifically trying to make sure that the human does not try to mate or have relations with any of these monster girls.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So Tenchi never canonly picks anybody, which is probably a good marketing choice to make, especially if you think you're going to keep making those shows ad nauseum. So I guess you haven't seen a lot of them, so you can't really comment on it. I just, want more Ray Romano in my anime. Bob, what's your way we go this week?
You're fucking weird.
I know. I think it works, though.
Yeah, that's fine.
I like it.
I was reminded of a thing while watching these, or as a conversation between episodes. We're in Spoopmas right now. This is actually, we're recording on October 30th of 2020. And as much as I love watching all my horror stuff, and I was actually going to, before coming on, talk about what I might acknowledge in my my nerd corner. I reminded myself that it used to be a holidays tradition, Christmas, so on and so forth, to tell ghost stories. You used to have horror happen during the dark winter months. And I think in our household, my wife and I are going to go back to that tradition of telling horror stories, ghost stories to each other in the warmth of our house, because it is the death of a year. It is the deadening of the crops. It is the darkest, scariest time for humans, let alone creatures overall. I want to have more horror stories during the holidays.
So you're going to tell scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago?
That's where that line comes from, yes.
Okay, there you go.
But it doesn't have to be just, oh boy, A Christmas Carol Part 18, Adrian's Revenge. It can just be.
Where's the reboot where Ebenezer is one of the three ghosts?
I would love to see that, honestly.
Yeah.
I would love that. To see him be the replacement for the Ghost of Christmas Future.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. He teaches you wise lessons.
I mean, you don't want to give him away early. You don't want him to be past or present.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Going through the three ghosts, the three apparitions that we see that are the storytellers and not just the Bob Marley that, whoa, boo, chains. You have your Ghost of Christmas Past, who is sprightly, young, and is supposed to help you remember the happy days.
Correct.
The Ghost of Christmas Present, who is here and gone over the course of the handful of hours of Christmas. And so you see him start being this jolly, heavy man who is filled with mirth and wealth. And you see him rot and die. And then you have the Ghost of Christmas Future, who, in the case of Ebenezer at the very least, is a specter of the death to come to you. Mm-hmm. Should you not fall on and try to bring about the Christmas joy.
Yep.
I feel like if you're going to have to pick one for Ebenezer, I don't think he's sprightly and young enough to be past. And present seems to be maybe a good little like pseudo hell that you get to put him through. But I think to have him be the warning that he was given to help to bring others to the light of Christmas would make the most sense.
You ready to do the nerd corner, Babu?
You know what? Let me just... Okay, I got my shoes on.
Let's take a walk over. Very exciting news here. Our good friends at Arbelos, Bob. Thankfully, last year they brought us a 4K film restoration print of Satan Tango. Bellatar's most famous film, mostly because it's 7.5 hours long. It's a very accurate adaptation of an Eastern Europe novel. Very great movie. Wonderful, wonderful movie. I got to sit on it in a theater back when those were open probably October 6th last year. Okay. Now, though they still have yet to release it on the Blu-ray they promised me. But when it comes out, it'll probably be 2 discs because it's a very long movie. Now they are doing the film right before Satan Tango that they had to make to get Satan Tango made, Damnation, which is sort of a fun Hungarian film noir about a guy who has an affair with this local singer, but she breaks it off with him to go back with her husband because he's going to help her get famous. So then he tries to set up her husband in this crime bust, but then things go exceedingly wrong from there. And it has your usual trademark Hungarian bleakness and beautiful Bellatar cinematography and these fantastic long takes that just go on, and the majesty of the choreography and mise en scène that allows each moment, each frame of that sequence to work. That is now in virtual theaters near you. Bob, what is your nerd corner this week?
So my nerd corner is sort of a two-parter. The first being, if I didn't mention it last week, highly recommend Crypt TV on YouTube. It is great horror cinema done in short bursts. Most of the films last anywhere from 2 minutes to maybe on its longest 12 or so. And that's not including the supercuts of several that are part of a series into a full half hour, maybe 40-minute video. So it's easily munchable, short horror film. And it's done very well. Solid scripts. Not all of them have speaking roles. They rely on the cinematography. Great practical effects. The most of the CG that they use is done so sparingly that you don't have a chance to really be like, oh, that's dumb. That's gross. That's dated. Highly recommend it. And if you are going to watch it, I would say check out Miss Anity. That's a great one. Or check out the Look-See. Those are probably their 2 most well-known besides The Birch. The second part is, as I alluded to earlier on in the episode, you should, by the time this releases, see that I have a credit in helping to make a new role-playing game. It's going to be called Niche. It's a role-playing game that uses 2d6, six-sided dice. You can find them inside your Monopoly board. But it's a solid way to make the stories that you want to tell without having to find a way to jankily work around D&D or Pathfinder or what have you. The SRD standard reference document or standard rules document, depending on who you talk to, is going to have all the base rules. It's going to be cheap as hell, and you can play right then and there as soon as you download it. So if you want, go find either Bob Scary VOA or Librarian PC. That's Librarian and then PC. Just capitalize those last three letters, and you'll be able to find our copies.
All right. Well, you're already sort of halfway through your plugs, Bob. Do you want to offer the rest of them?
I might as fucking well. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Scary VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk. If you want to see or hear me anywhere, you should go ahead and find me by my handle, Bob Scary VOA, on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other social media sites. You can also go to bobscaryvoa.com where you can listen to my demos, which should be changing shortly because I got some really great pointers from a bigwig over at Funimation, whose name I will not reveal, to try and tweak my character demo. So hopefully you'll hear some new stuff real soon. You can also go there to contact and hire me. Contact and hire me, please.
That's all right. Let's thank Bob for joining us this week, as he will each and every week during this season. Let's give a hand to Lev Van Rensselaer for helping us out. And I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, video essays, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media of a very similar-sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience how good you are at yo-yoing.
I used to be really good at it, but I don't have my X-Brain anymore because it's no longer 1998.